Hi everyone, I'm Pat from the Sewing Studio Fabric Superstore, and today I'm going to show you how to make this easy vinyl tote bag in only 5 steps. So let's get started. So let's start by talking about the vinyl. We carry a large variety of vinyls and we carry them in 2 different sizes of rolls. So I wanted to show you so you understand. This piece here that I have on the table is 18 inches by 27 inches this way. The piece that I have underneath, that's one size of vinyl that we carry. That's probably our most popular size. However, we have started cutting them now so that they're 18 inches long by 54 inches wide. Can you see how wide this is? So when it comes to making a tote bag, I'm just going to grab my tote bag. Can you see that when you go to lay out your tote bag to cut it, I like to fussy cut it. And fussy cut means I want to place my design how I want it so that it looks pretty, right? And it looks right. So I wanted the grain of my animal skin to go straight down the center. So normally when you want to fussy cut something or you want to play with the placement of the design, you normally need a little bit more. So it's good to get the one that's 18 inches by 54 inches. If you had purchased already 2 of the 18 by 27, you can use that too. And just remember that normally whatever you get, you're going to use every scrap of it, because if you have anything left, if you purchase the 18 inch by 54 inches wide and you're left with scraps, there's all kinds of stuff, different projects that you can use them for, and you can also make smaller pouches with a zipper. So I'm going to start by working on my larger piece here, and I'm going to show you what I do. Now we do have a written tutorial that Holly wrote, and she does have the measurements on there for the bags that we have on display in the store. But I want to let you know that you can really, once you understand how to do this, you can use your own measurements. You can make the bag bigger if you want it, or smaller. You can use up your scraps. So this is, to me, is kind of like a starting point. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I am going to look at my design, my vinyl. I'm going to look at my design here, and I know that I want this to be in the center of my bags and the front of my bag and the back, and I'm going to be able to place my webbing down the side here. So I want my bag, generally I make my bags 18 inches wide by about 12 inches deep going this way. So the other thing that comes into play is this, because if I measure 12 inches down from here, I'm probably going to cut this in half. So maybe right off the bat, I'm going to take my vinyl and I'm going to turn it in this direction. Okay, step 1, we're going to measure and cut all of our pieces for our vinyl bag. So I am going to fussy cut my design. I want this down the center, and I want this on the top of my bag because this is really a nice focal piece. So the top of my bag is 18 by 12.5 inch pieces. So I need to cut 2 of those. So what I do is I get my cutting mat, and I know that my bag needs to be 18 inches wide. So the center, the half of 18 is 9 inches. And so this here is my 9-inch line, and I've got the center of my design over it. So now I take my ruler and I double check, and I always use a 6-inch by 24-inch ruler. It's just my favorite size of ruler. So you can see it's transparent here, I want to make sure that my design is completely lined up and going straight. So I've lined up the center of my ruler, 6 inch, 3 inches my center, and I can see that it's running beautifully through the center of my design, and it lines up with the markings on my cutting mat. Okay, so now I'm going to come over here and I am going to cut over here. And yes, I do use my rotary cutter. This vinyl actually cuts like butter. It's very soft. Some of them are a little harder to cut, but this particular one cuts really, really easily. Okay, so I've cut my front. Let me throw it over here. Now, I leave it on there because in order to center this, I need to cut this is my 18 inch here. So it's going to be 18 inches wide. So let me cut this off. See how nice that cuts? Okay. So now I need to cut it 12.5 inches from top to bottom. So I need to, I'm just going to turn it. I'm going to line up my line that I just cut. Now you've got to think about this. This is an 18 inch square right now. So where do you want to place this? I'm going to bring this down because I want 12.5. And remember, if you want to make your bag smaller or the top of your bag smaller and you want to make it 10 inches, you can make it 10 inches. It's up to you. So I'm lining up 12.5 inches here. And this is going to be in a nice place. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and cut this. And actually what I've got left here, I could use for the bottom of another bag. Okay, and now I'm going to run along here and just straighten this out a little bit. I'm pretty perfect up here, but I'm going to straighten it. Okay, so now I've got one top. Now I got to cut my other. You put this to one side. Grab my vinyl again. I'm going to repeat the process. Now you see how when I lay it out here, the placement, I'm looking at placement. I'm looking on my mat here. I'm going to pull my mat down a little bit so you can see what I'm looking at. See here, up here, I'm looking for the 9 inch, which is half of 18, and I'm going to place the center of my reptilian design, my crocodile. I want to center it on that line. The pattern down here lines up beautifully. Okay, because I want both sides of my bag to look the same, right? Okay, so now I'm going to repeat the process. I'm going to check myself. I'm going to line up. This is my 9 inch. It looks very good. So I'm going to come over here. I'm going to cut it at 18. So I'm going to have two 18 by 12.5 inch pieces for the top of my bag. Get rid of my scraps. Now I'm going to turn it and I'm going to measure 12.5. So let me line this up with my straight line so I know it's perfect. Okay, 12.5. I don't want to spend too much time cutting, although it is pretty fast. Okay, and then I just want to even this off here. Normally I don't hang a ruler off the edge of the table, but for the camera's sake, I want to leave it lined up. Okay, so now my pieces are cut. You're going to think I'm silly, but I even keep my little scraps like this, because someday, who knows, I may want to weave it together into something. Someday I might show you something that I've made with my little strips. Okay, so I've got 2 tops to my bag. Next thing I want to do is the bottom. And the bottom of the bag, this is the crocodile, the pink crocodile. This is the mamba. This is absolutely gorgeous. This is snake as opposed to croc. Okay, so I already cut my 2 bottoms. If normally we do the bottom 18 inches, you always want the bottom of your bag to be the same width as the top of your bag. And then I normally do it between 5.5 or 6 inches wide, but I do have a bag over here and I just want to show it to you. So you see how this one, I kind of split it half and half. So again, you're the artist. You can use your own measurements, and you see how pretty it is when you place your fussy cut and place your design where you want it. Okay, so I've cut my 2 bottoms, and now what I need to do is I need to cut my corners out, and I need my scissors for that, and I need my ruler. I'm just going to reach over. So to measure, I use this ruler again. And normally, I cut 1.5 inch box corners. On the directions, I believe we say to do it 2. Basically, the difference is that your box corner will be a little bit wider. So it's up to you. As I say, normally I do 1.5. And that's what I'm going to do. So if we can, so you see how I line up my lines? And then I just get my marker. I have a chalk marker here. And do it again on the opposite corner. And you're going to do it to both sides. This vinyl, the black one, the Mamba, is a little bit heavier. And so what I like to do is use my heavier vinyls if I have them. If I purchase 2 vinyls because I like the 2 colors together, I generally would put the heavier or stiffer one on the bottom because it gives the bag a lot of structure. Okay, so I've got my 4 corners marked. I'm just going to go ahead and cut them. It really makes a difference to the bag when you box the corners. It gives it character, and it also, I think, makes the bag more roomy. So this is called boxing the corners. And again, the bigger the square, I want to say the larger the box, if that makes sense. Okay, so of course I'm going to tell you that I keep all these little squares because I like to create as I go. But look at how nice already that's taking shape. So then the last thing that we need to do is to cut your straps, your webbing. So I normally use 1 inch webbing. You can use 1.5 inch webbing if you like. Sometimes it depends what color the webbing is, you know, which one you choose, but generally I like to use the 1-inch webbing. Now again, on the instructions, it says for the webbing to be, let's see, cut 2 27-inch pieces of webbing. I just want to go over this with you a second. There's different ways of using your webbing. So I have a couple here where I take the webbing, or Holly's taken the webbing because Holly's made some of these. You see, you can really be creative with it and use it as part of your pattern. See how it, on this one, we've taken it all the way down to the bottom, and on the blue and black one here, I've actually inserted it into the seam where I attach the top of the bag to the bottom. And then I have another one here. So it's, again, it's up to you. This one is just attached behind. So it's your traditional way of attaching a webbing or strap, but it's up to you. So if you want to do it like this, you would need approximately 27 inches. Again, you can vary the length a little bit depending on how long or short you want it. So up to you. For the one that comes all the way down into the seam, I normally do my strips about 42 inches long. So that's what I have cut here. I have cut 2 strips 42 inches long because I am going to insert it into my seam when I attach the top and the bottom of the bag. Step 2, we're going to place and stitch our straps on the top part of the bag. So I have my webbing straps here, and I've placed my vinyl piece on my cutting mat. And as you can see here, I've got my 18-inch width going this way. So now I'm going to take my ruler, my 6-inch ruler, and I am going to line up the center, which is 3 inches, on the 9-inch line of my cutting mat. And you can see that it centers beautifully over my design. So what I do next, this is really, really easy to do, is I'm going to take my strap, my webbing, and to stick my webbing onto the vinyl, I don't like to use pins. And I have fallen in love ever since I've started really working with vinyl. I've fallen in love with sewing and craft tape. It works really, really well with vinyl because you do need to hold the vinyl in place. So I'm just getting my tape started here. So this sewing and craft tape, I like to use the 1/4 inch. I believe there's one that's narrower than that. So I peel it off, and I am going to, remember, this is just to hold your webbing down. I place it about 1/2 inch over from the edge of my ruler, and the top of the tape I finish at about 1 inch down from the top of my hem or my cut edge of my vinyl. So I'm going to go ahead and stick this down all the way down, and you can tear it, but go ahead and make sure it's stuck well, and I'm going to do the same to the other side. So much easier than pins. If you were using a wider webbing than 1 inch, you could place your strip, stick your strip down maybe a little bit further over. Okay, so once you know, you can see I ended 1 inch. So I use my ruler again to line up on the top of my vinyl. Finish your tape 1 inch in, 1 inch down. And then I'm going to take and peel. Sometimes you just have to press it a little bit more. Okay, here it comes. Peel your paper off. Okay. And now I'm going to take my webbing. This is such an easy way of doing it. And place the edge of your webbing along the edge of your ruler. And make sure that this goes all the way to the bottom. So the space between your webbing is going to be 6 inches apart. That's why a 6-inch wide ruler works so well. Okay, so stick it down. And then you're going to stick the other side down, and you need to make sure that you don't twist your webbing before you stick it down. Sometimes it just takes a couple of attempts to pull this up and leave the sticky behind. Okay, here we go. This is a nice sticky one. Okay, so I peeled it off, and now I'm going to do the same on this side. I'm going to line up, I butt up the edge of my webbing to the edge of my ruler. Make sure you don't move your ruler, and then stick your webbing down. See how easy that is? Okay, and make sure that your strap isn't twisted on top. And by finishing your sticky tape about 1 inch down, when I go to hem my top, I'm not going to get tape in my seam. Okay, so once you've done that, you can just remove your ruler. And if you like, you could stitch it now. I'm going to go ahead and I am going to repeat the process with the other side, and then I'm going to stitch it down. Now I'm going to sew the webbing onto my bag. I have it placed in my machine. I've threaded it up with black thread because my webbing is black, and I have my stitch length set at 3, and I'm going to stitch along the edge. And as I get to the top of my bag, you'll notice that I have marked here with a bit of yellow chalk 1.5 inches down from the top of my bag is where I'm going to lift and pivot. So now I'm going to lift my presser foot up, and I'm going to come across where I marked 1.5 inches down from the top, put my presser foot back down. So the vinyl that I'm sewing on right now is one of our more popular ones, and it does tend to be a little sticky. When I say sticky, I mean I need to use my Teflon foot. So when you're going to sew on vinyl, make sure that you test your vinyl and make sure that your foot glides easily over it. So now I'm finished with one of my webbings, and I would continue to stitch the other 3 down. Step 3, you're going to attach the bottom of the bag to the top of your bag, just like that, using clips. Then you're going to take it to your sewing machine and stitch about 1/2 inch seam allowance. I have one up under here, I have one side under here already. I have my stitch length, I always like to put it at about 3. So I have it placed under my needle, and I am going to stitch, and you can see how well the little clover clips work for this, because it is very hard to pin on vinyl. I'm actually using just a regular size 12 sewing needle in the machine. I am using my Teflon foot. I went ahead and left it on the machine. Okay, so now I get to the end. I'm going to double back reinforce a little bit, cut my thread, and then I am going to do some top stitching. I'm going to flip it to the front, and now when you go to stitch your top stitching, I have to tame the vinyl a minute here. You need to decide, sometimes the seam allowance inside will naturally flip one way or another, but this is the point where you would decide, do you want to top stitch on the pink in black? And maybe if you're not a very straight sewer, I know some of us aren't, I've still got black thread on my machine, you may want to do the top stitching on the black portion. So it's up to you, but whatever side you do the top stitching on, go ahead and flip your seam allowance under it so that you're stitching it down. And as you're stitching, go ahead and smooth, kind of pat your vinyl down a little bit. I'm sitting a little far from the machine, so now you can see that now, because I'm sewing, actually my foot is actually on the vinyl. If I didn't have my Teflon foot on right now, I'd probably be in a little bit of trouble. So when I say pet your vinyl, you see how I'm stroking it down? Because I want it to be nice and flat. And as I said, I have my stitch length on 3. Normally I just use a straight stitch for this. My stitch length at 3. Sometimes if I'm not working with vinyl, you might want to do a decorative stitch, but in this case that would be a big no. You want to just travel and help it across. And then when I'm done with this side, there we go, I'm going to go ahead and do the other side. So that's what you would do next. So now for step 4, we're going to sew our sides together, the bottom together, and we're going to box the corners. What's important about this is I have my front and my back right sides together already under my machine, but I wanted to show you that you need to line up your edges here so that once you stitch down the side and you open it up, your seams here are matched up. So you can see already I'm using the clips again. I'm going to bring it up to the top. And I am going to stitch with about a 1/2 inch seam allowance. I've still got my Teflon foot on. You don't need a Teflon foot for this part of the bag because you're actually not stitching directly on the vinyl, but no need to change it if you don't have to. So as I get close to my clips, I want to take my clips off. I'm a double checker. I like to double check that my seams are lining up. Go ahead and keep stitching. And then I'm going to repeat this on the other side. And then I'll show you how you stitch the bottom together. And as usual, you need to sometimes tame the vinyl a little bit. So when you get to the seam here, it gets a little bulky, so slow down just a little bit. Keep lining up your bag here. Okay, we're over that. As I say, this is very nice vinyl to work with. Okay, reinforce, and then go ahead and stitch your other side. Now we're going to stitch across the bottom. So now to box the corners, you need to open it up. See what I'm doing here? I open it up and I'm going to cut some of these threads. And you want to line up your side seam allowance with this seam allowance on the bottom. This is the bottom. This is the bottom seam on the bag. And then what I do is I flip one seam allowance in one direction and then the other seam allowance in the other direction. And then I take this to my sewing machine and I stitch about the same, about a ½ inch in. Make sure that your seam allowance lines up together, and then flip one seam allowance back and one seam allowance in the other direction so that you're reducing the bulk. So that corner is boxed, and now we're going to box the next one so you can see what I'm doing now. I flipped it. This corner is boxed. I just stitched it, and now I'm going to stitch this one. So again, vinyl needs to be tamed just a little bit. It's not difficult, but it can be a little bulky. But the end results are always so beautiful that it's worth it. Now, when you're boxing the second side and lining this up, I always flip this seam allowance to the same side as I did on this corner. So I flipped it over to the right, so I'm going to flip this one to the right. So then my side seam allowance is going to flip in the other direction. And I'm just going to put it under my sewing machine, put my presser foot down. Sometimes what people will do is if you're boxing a corner and you know there's going to be a lot of stress or wear and tear on the bag, you could go back and stitch another line of stitching just to the inside of that line, and then you're reinforcing it. So now I've stitched my sides together, my bottom, and I have boxed my corners nicely. So step number 5 is the final step. You're going to turn your bag inside out, and you're going to fold over the top hem and you're going to stitch it down. I already have the bag on the machine here, and I want to give you a little bit of a tip here, because again, the vinyl can be a little bit testy, and as I say, this one can stick a little bit to the bed of your machine, but I don't want you to get discouraged by that, because these bags make up beautifully. So all I do, because vinyl doesn't fray on the edge, all you need to do is fold it over. And as you can see, I've got the front of my bag to the bed of my machine, and I've got it folded over. I've started stitching it, and I feel like it's easier to start stitching not on the bulky edge of the seam. I start stitching maybe about a ½ inch away from my side seam, because the bulk may cause you a little bit of trouble getting over it when you first start out. So I've started stitching, and I wanted to show you a couple of different ways that you can do this. You can fold as you go like this, or if you like, you can fold it all over in the beginning and put your clips in. You can use your clips, your clover clips. If you have bigger ones, that's fine. But you can also use your double-sided sticky tape. So I have a piece of it here to show you where I put it. And then you could just peel it off, leave the sticky behind. I don't know whether you can see it on camera, but I left the sticky behind. And I'm basically folding about a ½ inch over. And then you can just use that. So now I'm going to start sewing. And you can see too that at this point, before I started stitching this, I changed my thread to pink. Previously I had black thread because I stitched my black webbing. So kind of in the beginning, the color of the webbing dictates what color of thread you're going to use. If I had wanted to stitch black along the top, I could have. Now I want to show you something. I'm getting close to where my webbing is attached to my bag, and I'm going to pull that back because I don't want to stitch it into my hem that I'm doing on the top of my bag. So make sure that doesn't get tangled up. So I'm going to keep sewing here and finish my bag. So in 5 easy and fun steps, I finished my tote bag, I tamed the croc, and look at how beautiful it came out. And in the beginning of the video, I talked to you about using your scraps. And here I have a couple of bags with zippers that I made using remnants of the vinyl. And I also have another little card holder wallet made out of some of the remnants of the vinyls. So thanks for watching. Happy sewing. I hope you enjoyed the video.